participants please to rename yourself with your full name followed by your organization's name. You can do this by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your Zoom window and hovering the mouse over your name in the participant list on the right side of your Zoom window to the options More. You will click and then you can rename. Please keep your mic muted throughout the presentation and post your questions anytime in the Q&A chat box. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We are now recording. So now I go in. Good evening and welcome everybody to this Food Innovation and Opportunities in Asia, and also a very good morning in Latin America. Most of participants are actually in Latin America to this event organized by the Latin American Chamber of Commerce. My name is Angela Torres. I'm the founder and executive director of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be with you today guiding this webinar. We have a great program ahead of us, so let's get started. By this, please join me to welcome Dr. Pablo Lizana, the Honorary President of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce, to deliver his welcome remarks. Pablo.
Thank you, Angela. Buenos días a Latinoamérica. Bienvenidos. Good evening to Singapore. Welcome to the Food Innovation and Opportunities in Asia event, specially organized for Latin American food manufacturing companies. These companies are at the core of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce ecosystem in Singapore because of their enormous importance in the region and the world. I would like to open this webinar with a very powerful statement by Michael Morris, the World Bank leader agriculture economist. He said, Latin America and the Caribbean region are the world breadbasket and lungs. The Economist explains in the paper, Future Foodscapes, Reimagining Agriculture in Latin America and the Caribbean, that what happens in Latin America and Caribbean farms, food processing facilities, supermarkets, and beyond has important implications both locally and globally. The region's agri-food systems make vital contributions to a diverse set of development objectives. Including growth and trade promotion, poverty reduction, food and nutrition, security, and climate resilience. Furthermore, because Latin America is the world's largest net food exporter, the region's agri-food system can help lower and stabilize international food prices, bringing benefits to consumers everywhere. And because the region is home to vast forests and extensive savannas, it plays a critical role in shaping global weather patterns and mitigating climate change. This is the end of the explanation. So the agribusiness sector has been called to evolve and meet future demand of food in a sustainable way. The industry in Latin America needs to observe the actual and upcoming trends and consider the many possible developments in order to fully seize the opportunities coming up. And in light of these, we have organized this event and gathered for this session a lineup of highly skilled professionals in the industry that will share with us, first, the food consumption trends in Asia. Secondly, how Singapore is preparing its agribusiness ecosystem in order to become the springboard of international companies to access Asia. And third, a panel discussion around three angles: innovation, co-manufacturing, and distribution, networks between Singapore and Latin America. For tomorrow's session, we have prepared interventions of three companies based in Singapore to discourse on their experience in Singapore as a distribution hub, a manufacturing center, and an innovation launchpad. In addition to this knowledge sharing session, the executives at the Chamber have prepared a series of matchmaking meetings to help integrate the companies of Latin America into the Asian network. We thank our gold sponsor of the event, Grupo Nutresa, a leading food manufacturing company from Colombia with production facilities and a distribution network present in more than 14 countries. We would also like to thank its subsidiary Colcafé, the largest Colombian coffee manufacturer with a strong international footprint. Thank you to our gold sponsors. Moreover, we are very pleased to take this opportunity to announce the signing of a memorandum of understanding with Singapore Food Manufacturers Association. Under this memorandum, both entities look forward to jointly collaborate and enhance the relations among our members by building meaningful learning and business opportunities. Please join me to cordially welcome Singapore Food Manufacturers Association as part of the LatAmCham family. I thank the presence of the Honorary President David Tan, the Executive Committee of the Association, and the members of Enterprise Singapore for being present at this virtual signing ceremony. Mr. David Tan, over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Pablo. Latin America Chamber of Commerce Singapore, President Dr. Pablo Lizana, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and also good morning to all our friends in Latin America. I'm very pleased to be here today for the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between Latin America Chamber of Commerce Singapore and Singapore Food Manufacturer Association, SFMA, on our partnership. Singapore enjoys friendly relations with countries in Latin America. According to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, economic cooperation between Singapore and Latin America is increasing steadily. Despite of a slowdown in the global economy, Singapore trade with Latin America reached Singapore 18.5 billion in the year 2019. Singapore has also concluded free trade agreement with several Latin America countries, Costa Rica, Panama, and Peru. Chile, Mexico, and Peru are also members of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreements for Trade Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. Singapore also signed a free trade agreement by the end of this year with Pacific Alliance, a trading bloc of 4 Latin American nations, namely Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, according to the Ministry of States for Trade and Industry, Mr. Alvin Tan, on the 29th of June. This agreement will enable businesses on both sides to access market opportunity and foster greater cooperations. Here in SFMA, we also stay committed to help our food companies diversify and venture into new markets. I'm heartened to see businesses between Singapore and Latin America being able to benefit from preferential tariffs. With this MOU, we can further advance our partnership and support between Singapore and Latin America food companies. And we are also confident to see more trade flow between us. I look forward to a successful implementation of our MOU and wish all companies in attendance a fruitful business matching session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the President of the Singapore Food Manufacturers Association and the President of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce proceed to sign the MOU.
Here it is, Angela.
Great. I like to clap. This is very good. And we're very excited to start working with the Singapore Food Manufacturing Association. Moving into the topic of food consumption and trends in Asia, I would like to welcome Tim Hale, the Key Accounts Director of Southeast Asia of Global Data. Tim, the mic and this is yours.
Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you, Pablo and David, the Latin American Chamber of Commerce for having me on board. What I'd like to do now is go into my presentation. So hopefully now, if I have pressed the right buttons, you are seeing opportunities in the Asia Pacific food sector. Angela, can you nod if I've pressed the correct buttons? Brilliant, right. We're on. Thank you. So what I plan to do in this session, I've got a 20 minutes. I'm going to rush through it. I've got a lot of slides, which I can give you all afterwards. I'm going to focus on just two categories of food, the bakery and cereal sector, as well as the savory snacks sector. I recognize that many people attending this are responsible for all sorts of different product ranges. We in Global Data do cover those product ranges. So if you'd like any specific data for your countries or your markets, please email me afterwards and I'll let you know what we've got. We cover both the food service sector as well as the consumer retail sector. I'm focusing here mostly on the consumer retail sector, but I'm going to start with a quick overview of the food service sector for the region. And the key takeaways from this slide are that the full service restaurants are the largest channel by volume and value for the sector. Consumers like to report that they are concerned particularly about health issues when it comes to consumption of food. And yet paradoxically, if you look at the largest brand of food in the region, we see it's McDonald's. So this health consciousness is a trend that we're going to see throughout this. And yet, obviously, there is still a consumption of old traditional foods as well. So I want to go into the bakery and cereals sector first. And if you look at the overall market size globally, it's 598,000 million globally. Asia Pacific is actually a relatively small component of the overall market for bakery and cereals. Per capita consumption is $34, which is one of the smallest in the world, but it does have the highest growth rate over the 5-year period that we're tracking here in this report, the value growth of 4.1%. The chart here on the left shows the volume growth rates of Asia Pacific countries, and the chart on the right, the matrix on the right, shows our highest priority countries. So what we've done is we've tracked value for 2019 against value growth rates for the 5-year period, and the highest value and growth potential countries are Australia, China, India, and Japan. A bit more on our prioritized for coming up shortly. Looking at this by category though, the bubbles in this chart show the market value across the 11 categories of bakeries and cereals. The x-axis shows the value growth rate against the y-axis of the volume growth rate. So for market value, what we've got in the aquamarine looking blob there on the right of the screen is the cakes, pastries, and sweet pies, and they've got 44% market value, and they've got the highest volume and value growth because they're top right on this screen. And that's followed by market value of bread and rolls, which is towards the left in blue. They've got 16% for market value. And then going back up to the top on the right, cookies, 15%, and they've got the second highest volume and value growth. So going back to our scoring system now for the countries, and out of 26 countries that we've ranked, we have this ranking system that looks at the highest growth opportunities. And our highest priority countries are Japan, Australia, China, and Singapore, the top 4 highest potential. The value and volume for each of these countries is shown on this slide here. Again, we'll be able to share this with you afterwards, so I won't go into the specifics of the value and the volume and the growth rates of that, but we'll let you look at those in your own time. When we look at the value share for bakeries and cereals, we see that they are lower in priority, as you would expect, really, to the consumption staples of meat, which has very high percentage shares, second with dairy and soy food. Bakery and cereals are smaller, and culturally they are a smaller consumption proportion than they would be, say, in Europe or North America. And perhaps this is why we see Australia showing the highest value share for consumption of bakery and cereals. The change in consumption levels, what we see for this is that for 3 out of the 4 top markets, the cakes, pastries, and sweet pies, along with the savory biscuits, are showing growth. Okay, and whereas the other categories are showing a mixture of being decreasing or no change with some increasing. Coming to the leading companies' share, what we see actually is that although Mondelez does seem to be the market leader, the market is really very highly fragmented, and that says to me there is plenty of room for new players to join this market. And you see stuff like artisanal brands as well, creating a large proportion of that whole market. Cookies are the most competitive category, as we can see from this, cookies being the middle one here, sweet biscuits. And what we see here is that the private label sector, which is on the top left, private label here, has got a very strong presence across all the categories. And then we also see that cakes, pastries, and sweet pies has got a lot of brands represented in that sector. So the key challenges for the bakeries and cereal sector, one is supply chain, the cold chain, the lack of proper refrigeration, which leads to inadequate distribution, particularly in the region in countries which suffer from inconsistent electricity supply, such as Bangladesh, Myanmar, Pakistan, Indonesia, and India. And this hampers the growth of the sector as they can't, the products can't reach to some of the smaller rural areas without this electricity supply. I've talked earlier about health and wellness, the trend for that being on the rise, with consumers increasingly saying they're looking for stuff which is more healthy for them. And this means that manufacturers are trying to develop products which appeal to this health trend. And then competition from fast food outlets. So we've got McDonald's, which I mentioned, for instance, being the most popular brands in the region, bringing out stuff like Filipino-style bread rolls in the Philippines to compete with this, and twisty pasta soup in Hong Kong to compete with the category. And this, of course, is making things difficult for manufacturers of this sector. So the future outlook for bakeries and cereals, I've mentioned the artisanal products. We see more growth for that sector. We're certainly seeing this where I live in Singapore with a lot of craft bakery shops opening up. We see e-commerce as being a driving way for getting more products out to market. We've seen this already in areas, for instance, Japanese respondents consuming this quite substantially. And then the clean growth, clean label products. So stuff such as organic, natural, and preservative-free attributes. We see this as impacting the sector as manufacturers are going to start adjusting their product lines. So going on now to the savory snacks sector. Sorry, just page up. So the savory snacks here. So here, Asia Pacific has actually got the largest one of all the global markets. And along with that, it's also got the highest growth rates, despite actually still being one of the lowest per capita consumers. And obviously this is because of the growing affluence, as well as the growing populations in the region, as well as some interest obviously in the products as well. So looking at it in the same way that we looked at this before, the graph on the right shows the highest potential for value over value growth rates. China and India are the top scorers there, and you can see the other ones along the top as well the other priority markets. We're going to go into our chosen 4. When we look at the category, the ethnic and traditional snacks, the value growth is 6.4% for them, followed by nuts and seeds and potato chips at 5.2%. And you can see some of the other categories as well, processed snacks and meat snacks, having very similar market value as nuts and seeds and ethnic traditional snacks. So our scoring system for the highest growth markets has thrown up 4 different ones from when we were looking at bakery and cereals earlier. Here we're looking at New Zealand, Taiwan, Indonesia, and the Philippines for our top 4 chosen markets for growth potential. And here we've got the value and the volume numbers for both of these countries. Again, as I said, you can share this with you afterwards, so you can look in detail at the value and the growth rates for all of these markets. But change in consumption level, we see that nuts and seeds is most likely to see growth, followed, we think, by ethnic snacks. Hang on a sec. The value share, as we saw, the value share, we saw this before, that meat and dairy and soy food, of course, is the highest driver in the region, and savoury snacks is a small proportion of this, but Philippines has got the highest potential level. And then here I was talking about the change in consumption level with nuts and seeds, followed by ethnic snacks as being the ones with the more likely to show increase. In terms of the companies that are dominating the market, PepsiCo has the largest market share, but again, we see a fairly fragmented market with very many players. In terms of the brands put out by these organizations, Lay's has got the highest individual brand share, but private label has still got a presence in all these categories as well. So you see private label along here. We've got private label presence with all of them. And nuts and seeds is a category where apart from Lay's, pretty much all the other brands have got a presence in the nuts and seeds category. The challenges for the savoury snack sector, we see competition from other sectors. We see concerns over high salt content. There's a campaign in China to wean people off high salt content because of the premature deaths that it's causing, and also changing consumer diet preferences. So this desire or campaigns to have more unprocessed fruits, vegetables, and foods, and rising popularity of unprocessed foods is actually challenging the sector. And so our future outlook that we see for the savoury snack sector is we do see demand for natural, less processed products. We see that as going to be increasing as consumers start to think about getting more healthy. E-commerce, again, is a major platform in the savoury snack sector, and it's certainly been growing in popularity during the pandemic, as the e-commerce providers have really been tested to their limits. We also see sustainable packaging gaining prominence in the region as manufacturers come under fire to create plastic-free packaging or disposable packaging. Certainly, we're getting a lot of feedback from all of our consumer surveys from people saying they want to see more of that. They want to see more sustainability in the products that they consume. So that's fast speed. That's our overview for the bakery and cereal sector and the Asia Pacific snack sector. The key takeaways for this, I think, is that, and we've gone through 8 different countries in this and many different categories as well, is that we see varying levels of growth. Overall, we see high growth rates in the 5-year period that we're tracking, albeit from a small base, very often compared with the rest of the world in terms of per capita consumption. But we also see that each of those markets has got quite different tastes and they're in quite different rates of growth as well, and quite different types of popularity for different foods. And what that says to me is that when you're approaching these markets, you really have to have a country by country strategy for each of them going forward. Okay, my details are here just in case you wanted to get any other data that's not on the slides. What I'd like to do now is to hand back to Angela so she can then carry on with the proceedings. I guess I stop my share now, right, Angela?
Right. I think everybody get your data. Tim.hill@globaldata.com. Tim, thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. We will be sharing this presentation with the participants too. I think there's a lot of potential, and the pandemic has just made emphasis in many other sectors. I think we're all at home snacking, so let's snack healthy.
Yes.
And then I would like to invite our next speaker, John Eng. He is the head of the Agri-Food in the Economic Development Board of Singapore. He will be presenting on Singapore's approach to developing the agri-food technology sector. John, welcome.
Hi, Angela. Should I just load my slides?
Yes, please.
Oops. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. You want to put it in presentation mode?
You see it right in presentation mode?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. So thanks and buenos dias to our Latin American friends, and good evening to all who are dialing in from Singapore and Asia. As Angela mentioned, my name's John, and I head up the Singapore EDB's Agri-Food division. As part of the Singapore government, the EDB works with companies from all over the world, as well as our local stakeholders such as Singapore Food Agency, to develop an industry for agri-food technologies in Singapore. You may have visited Singapore before, or are familiar with Singapore as a haven for food from different cultures. Or perhaps you've visited Singapore and you know Singapore as a business hub for corporates such as Nestle to develop food and nutritional products for the Asian region. But can Singapore be a hub to impact global food systems using emerging agri-food technologies? Today, I'm very happy to share with you a brief update on Singapore's journey in agri-food, in particular with a focus on alternative proteins. Okay, I hope you see the next slide now, but please stop me if you don't. So firstly, an introduction of EDB. EDB is a lead government agency in Singapore, overseeing global investment promotion efforts and the development
John,
of many
excuse
of...
me, with...
Do you see it? Angela?
It's good now.
Okay, yeah. EDB is the lead government agency overseeing global investment promotion efforts and the development of many of our industries here in Singapore. So despite being a city-state of just 300 square miles, we have quite an interesting economic composition. So nearly 50% of the of the exportable economy, so if you see the blue part of the pie chart there, is actually derived from high-tech manufacturing such as biopharmaceuticals, chemicals, semiconductors. And the other half of our exportable economy comprises of services industries such as infocoms, technology, finance, and trade. EDB supports companies who are exploring expansion opportunities in Singapore, and we also help to ensure that Singapore has a conducive and trusted environment for them to operate in, as you can see on the right side of the slide here. It should be noted though that as I talk about the agri-food sector next, when we develop this sector, we certainly don't do this by ourselves. So while EDB focuses on engaging global companies to set up, to consider Singapore as their base, we work with our counterparts from Enterprise Singapore, which oversee our local homegrown businesses, including many of the exciting startups that are coming up. And then the Singapore Food Agency oversees our food safety as a regulator, as well as strategies for Singapore's food security. So without further ado, on this note, let me start by sharing why is Singapore looking at agri-food. So the traditional model of food,
John, excuse me, but we don't see it on presentation mode. Yes, there we see it. It just keep changing. Now we see it in presentation mode. Please carry on. Thank you.
Sorry, you see it flipping from site from application to screen mode, is it, Angela?
Then now we see it on screen mode. It is good now.
It's good?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so why are we looking at the agri-food sector? So, do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, so why are we looking at agri-food sector? Globally, I think there's a traditional model of farming which requires us to use more land, more labor every time we wanted to expand food production. But with global developments, as you see globally, climate change affecting our ability to expand the amount of arable land. And then, as you think about then the world we live in right now, affected by COVID, right? That has a huge implication on our food value chain today. And you see how movement restrictions, trade restrictions have an impact on our different countries' ability to access food, especially for urban cities. And last but not least, I think more importantly as well, the consumers are changing. In the past, especially in Asia, for us to consume food, we are guided by value. We go for whatever is cheapest in the markets. But increasingly, even in this part of the world, in Asia, consumers are guided by values when they make their purchase decisions, whether the food is more sustainable, whether I'm causing harm to the environment, whether it's good for my health. And the way that we are buying or purchasing our food, I'm not sure if you experience this as well, but certainly in Singapore, the way we buy our food has changed with COVID, right? We are buying a lot more of the food services online, as well as then even buying our groceries online. So the way that we are actually accessing or experiencing our food is changing. So this brings us to the need for us to consider, are there alternative ways for us to actually produce food so that we meet our future generations' food demands? Closer to home, certainly I think the implications on food resilience are especially key for small urban city-states just like Singapore, which has not much arable land, or access to lots of labor or water. So for us in Singapore, we started on this journey led by the Singapore Food Agency to come up with the vision of 30 by 30. So what does this mean? It means producing as Singapore 30% of our nutritional needs by 2030 locally. So in spite of the constraints, as I mentioned to you, that present itself to urban cities, we believe that technologies can help us overcome these constraints. And let me talk about some of these technologies that we are focused on. So there are three technologies that Singapore is starting off with. The first is urban agriculture, which for us challenges the assumption that actually farming needs to be done horizontally and also in a very land intensive manner. So to give you an example, today in Singapore, we produce about 13% of our local needs for leafy vegetables. So that's give or take about 12,000 tons of leafy vegetables. Every one of our farms, by average, is about 2 hectares in size, and it produces about 130 tons of produce a year. Now, the kind of companies that we are engaging with now, the high-tech farms, these can actually produce 1,000 tons of produce just on 1 hectare of space, not even land, it's space. And the reason why these farms can do so is because of the adoption of technologies which enable it, such as your IoT, environmental control systems, and heavy automation. And in fact, I think we are just on the start of a revolution here. Besides the ability to produce at scale in an urban environment, we believe that with technologies such as advanced seed breeding, as an example, there's a lot more yield that we can unlock, and more importantly, there's a lot more that we can do in terms of standardizing or customizing the produce that consumers have access to. So what this means for consumers in the future could be more consistent, higher quality produce. The other vertical that we are interested in is aquaculture. And it's very important to us because if you think about it, it takes about 7 to 9 pounds of feed to get 1 pound of meat from animal livestock production today. So that is highly unsustainable as you think about where the feed comes from, whether it's from agriculture or even fisheries today. So there's a big question mark in terms of can there be a more sustainable aquaculture, more sustainable animal meat production technology, and we think aquaculture is very exciting because it is closer to 1:1 ratio in terms of feed versus the meat harvested. And it's especially important, we think, for the region around us, because Southeast Asia is a massive aquaculture region. 4 of the world's top 10 aquaculture producing region is from this part of the world. And in fact, we believe that close to 20 to 25% of global aquaculture is going to come from this region. In that regard, Singapore may have a role in terms of developing the technologies to improve nutrition, health, technology, and genetics to impact aquaculture in the region. The last piece, alternative proteins. Imagine having steak or milk without having to raise cattle. I think with technologies such as plant-based proteins, microbial proteins, as well as cultured meat, this might become a reality one day. And for Singapore then, as we think about these technologies that are emerging in this space, can Singapore be that hub where these technologies are being developed to sustainably feed the world? And it's very exciting for us because as we look at this space, there is a good momentum of interest, and it's not just from the global companies that we are engaging, but really the local companies as well. So, and all these investments come in spite of, I think, what's happening in the world in 2020 in terms of COVID. I guess, in spite of the challenges, everyone needs to eat. But, just looking at the chart here, we have companies, if you look at the top, starting with the local companies like Growthwell, as well as Nick Gen Foods or Livetree Biotech. These are plant-based protein or meats companies that have set up that locally homegrown companies, as well as then companies such as Shook Meats and Turtle Tree Labs, which are developing cell-based solutions for seafood as well as milk. And on the bottom half of this screen, we see a good interest from overseas-based companies as well to tap into this emerging ecosystem, as well as the market potential in the region. So, starting from companies such as Bühler and Givaudan, which have set up a plant-based pilot plant to bring extrusion development capabilities to startups who want to actually develop plant-based meat products. And alongside that, you have companies such as Eat Just or even Oatly on the right there that have set up plant-based milk, plant-based egg and dairy manufacturing in Singapore. In addition, there was a good pace of interest in terms of R&D from companies such as Perfect Day, ADM, Avan Meats, Firmenich, ready to tap into the growth potential in Asia as well. So why Singapore? I think in alternative proteins, given the nascency of this sector, I think what is top of mind for many of the companies is actually innovation. And so the first thing that we did there is to actually try and create a venture ecosystem for agri-food tech in Singapore, including alternative proteins. How we did so? Kudos to our partners at Enterprise Singapore. We worked with them to actually anchor a couple of global accelerators and their funds in Singapore. What this means for startups globally is that then there is a platform for them to access guidance and resources to tap into growth markets in Asia. For us, what this means for the corporates is then they have multipliers which they can work with to access innovation. So to some extent, the innovation comes to them right here in Singapore for them to better understand the technologies and explore this space. The second thing that we did here is to actually think about the public R&D capabilities. Here, what we have done, firstly, we have actually set up dedicated research institutes to develop technologies for the future of food. Two of them. So one of them is the Singapore Institute for Food, Biotech and Biotechnology Innovation. This offers a wide range of capabilities from biotransformation to different kinds of food formulation capabilities. At the same time, we're also investing in long-term public R&D funding to support research programs among the public researchers here. So we announced in 2019, $144 million Singapore dollars or $100 million US dollars thereabouts back then of research funding called the Singapore Food Storage R&D Program. And that will be centered around public research in sustainable urban food production, future foods such as alternative proteins, as well as food safety. The next thing that we did here to support innovation is also then invest in infrastructure. So there, I think we work with our partners at Temasek, as well as our research institutes to develop some of these capabilities, ranging from things such as food production pilot plants, all the way down to test kitchens and sensory labs. The next thing that is quite top of mind for startups is, when can I get my product to market? So there, I think the first thing that we did there is to actually answer the question on food safety. I think for food, for any food innovation, the first thing that has to be solved is whether it's safe for the consumers, especially for the emerging technologies that we're working on. So here, the Singapore Food Agency came up with a novel foods regulatory framework to guide companies who are seeking pre-market approval for their novel foods. After a process, we also recently announced sometime in late last year that we will be the first in the world to actually allow the sale of cultured meat. And one of the companies that got the approval is Eat Just. The second thing that we do there, recognizing that the science of regulation is an evolving one, especially in this fast-moving space. Our colleagues, Singapore Food Agency, collaborated with A-Star as well as Singapore's Nanyang Technological University to set up a future-ready food safety hub. This center will work with companies who are developing new technologies to try and understand what are the protocols that they can put in place to assess food safety risk. And at the same time, they will also play a role in helping build consumer awareness of these emerging technologies. Last but not least, in terms of launching products, we also are interested to work with companies to actually broaden their channel access into Asia. So one example is we work with SETS to develop this one-stop platform for alternative proteins to access markets in Asia. As the technologies evolve and mature, and the market potential in Asia increases, we are seeing more and more interest in terms of manufacturing as well. And maybe I'll share with you why I think the companies are interested in Singapore. The first thing is around the track record. I think Singapore is a very interesting location. I think it's quite hard to find a location around the world where you've got a huge base of chemicals manufacturing. So we are the world's #8 exporter of chemicals. In spite of our small size, just 300 square miles. We produce 6 of the world's top 15 medicines, and also our key production hub for infant nutrition and beverages. So all this within this island here. And what this means to the company is that they have a trusted workforce, that is familiar with IP protection and quality and things like that. But building on that, how we are looking to support companies is to explore then whether we can have really good infrastructure. So one example that our colleagues at JTC work with Enterprise Singapore on is to set up the JTC Food Hub at the northern part of Singapore, which is a one-stop shop for food manufacturers to do manufacturing alongside services and capabilities such as your warehouse facility and an integrated cold room. The third thing that we do here is to develop a base of contract manufacturing partners. One example here is SG Protein, which will be Singapore's first contract manufacturing fund for plant-based meat alternatives. And what this provides is world-class infrastructure from Brula to startups and companies which need a partner to produce for them to access Asia. So the last couple of slides I hope were useful, just to give you an update of why we're looking at this space, what are we focused on, as well as then some of the recent investments and how we are working with companies. So I hope this is a start for future conversations. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions. My email address is there as well. If not, Angela has it. If not, then join the upcoming event. We work very closely with our partners there as well. So one example is the Rethink Asia Pacific Agri-Food Innovation Week, which will happen in November. Do check it out, and I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for that presentation. And I think we are all in the understanding that Singapore does building a big hub for food technology here in Asia. I would like to follow our next session, which will be a panel discussion. We will discuss actually more about Singapore as a hub for innovation, manufacturing, and accessing to the Asian market. And I would like to invite Dr. Pablo Lizana as the moderator and our panelists. Christian Carrillo, he is the head of technology Southeast Asia and Oceania at Buller Group. Otavio Augusto Lopez, principal director in the agri-food at Accenture. And Tasuk Jain, head of ASEAN Taste and Wellbeing at Givaudan. Welcome.
Thank you, Angela. And now we are starting the panel discussion, and the panel discussion is not going to last 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So the recommendation I would like to start with is for those in Latin America, I hope everybody has a good coffee or tea. For those in Asia, I expect everybody to have a good glass of wine. So to have an exciting discussion with the participants Angela just introduced. So welcome to Christian Carrillo, welcome to Otavio Augusto Lopez, and welcome to Tansuk Jain. The topic we're going to be discussing is indeed the big picture and related to the agri-food development we are expecting to happen. We have huge challenges in front. We have challenges mentioned already a few times today. 9 billion people to be fed in the future with what? And we are getting that's one of the challenges, but we are getting as well challenges on the available land, farmland. We are getting challenges in resources. So we need to do something. And thanks to technology, we are having the opportunity to do something. Technology is helping us to be more efficient, to be more effective, to increase productivities. And human being is always being very curious. And therefore, I'm very confident in seeing a development which is going to help us to face the challenges and to get over the challenges. And therefore, today the topic is going to be one, the link Latin America, Asia, the market in Asia, the development of the market in Asia. We're going to hear from experts of the industry, what are the experiences they had, with regards to the aspects we just talked: innovation, manufacturing, distribution. And we are going to see as well the role Singapore can have in this development, particularly with the involvement of Latin American companies. And we just saw in the presentation, the presentation we just got to see, the role has been of Singapore in different sectors and what might be the role of Singapore in the future. And there was a key word, a trusted partner. Singapore has always been a trusted partner in many, many sectors, allowing many companies from many parts of the world to enter this region. And therefore, let's start. I mean, I mentioned already the topics we are going to be addressing. One topic which we're going to highlight during the discussion is going to be the Latin American companies. What are the challenges they might be facing while coming to Asia? What are solutions or what are recommendations we can give? And all these in the context as mentioned. Now, let's start with the discussion. I would like to start very top down, addressing the market first and having a few impressions of the participants about the market, and move on to the topics I mentioned: success factors, Latin American companies, and the role of Singapore. If we start with, and I would like to ask each of us, I'm gonna ask you a question now, and or a few questions. You are free to answer the question based on your experience, your view on the market, your view on the topic, etc. But before answering, please give us a very brief introduction to yourself and a brief introduction to your company and the role of your company in this ecosystem. And particularly, what is the position in the value chain? What is the contribution you have in the entire ecosystem? So to facilitate a little bit to the audience and to understand better, where is your focus? And let's start now as introduction, and let's start now. And I would like to address my first question to Christian Carrillo from Bühler regarding the market. And I mean, Christian, what would you say are the major developments we are seeing in the agri-food sector? So the mega trends globally, but particularly in Asia. And what is defining the new dynamics in these markets? So in these new markets we are developing, we are seeing the development of. And please, I mean, please address the question based on the different spaces we have, the human and animal nutritional segments, for example. What might be the specific role of meat and other alternatives in the coming years, etc., etc.
Thanks a lot, Pablo. Thanks for the introduction, and indeed a very interesting and sophisticated question. I think there's a lot of topics to discuss there and to share there. But let's quick introduce myself. So I'm Christian. Buenas noches, buenos días para todos en Sudamérica que nos están escuchando hoy. As you know, as you can read from my name, I'm from South America. My father is from Colombia. My mom is from Switzerland, and I was born in Colombia. I spent my first years in Colombia, but then pretty fast we moved to Switzerland, where I did my whole development and start working for Bühler in Switzerland. I have lived as well in Argentina for many years, and in Brazil for nearly a half year, near Curitiba, for those that are based right now in Brazil. Since 4 years here in Singapore, and I must say that the cultural change between South America and Southeast Asia, it's really huge, from the mentality, from how the people do business, from how the people consumption behaviors and general behaviors, it's a complete different way to compare. And I think these are one of the biggest challenge, if I would say, when we try to combine South America and Southeast Asia, or Asia in general. It's the way of communication. And one great example that I always bring is in some countries here in Southeast Asia, people will always say yes, yes, yes when you are asking something or you are telling something. But that's yes, yes, yes doesn't mean they are agreeing with you. They are just saying yes, yes, yes. They are listening to you. However, that doesn't mean that they are agreeing to you. So it's always this kind of cultural changes and cultural adaptations that you need to do whenever you come to Southeast Asia. Quick, jumping up to Bühler. I guess most of you might know Bühler. Bühler is a family-owned company, a Swiss family-owned company with more than 160 years in the industry and more than 12,000 employees worldwide. We are present in 142 countries, meanwhile, and our main focus is the machinery manufacturing for the whole food industry, mainly from crop to field, but as well some advanced materials such as glass coatings, battery masses, pigments, and this kind of special advanced materials. We are not only focusing on the human nutrition side, but as well on the animal nutrition side and all the kind of side streams of the industry of the food manufacturing and non-food manufacturing side. Here in Southeast Asia, our first office, we opened it here indeed in Singapore in 1977. Why Singapore? I think this is as well something I created when I came here. I think Singapore is Asia for dummies, in a way. So here in Singapore, you will find all the different cultures that you will find in Southeast Asia, but done on an easy way. So it's very easy to adapt. It's very easy to understand the cultures. It's very easy to get how they live their different cultures. So you have places like Little India, you have different places where more the Muslims are, or all these, or the Chinese ones. So it's very easy to change the different cultures within such a small city. And this brings a lot of diversity. And this is as well one of the points that I think later might be a bit addressed on why Singapore is so interesting into the whole development of innovation. So, Pablo, coming quick back to your question on where do we see the mega trends coming in the world. So if we look what is a mega trend and what drives a mega trend is certainly all the world situation that we are living right now. And if we look on the news, if we look on what are the biggest news and the biggest concerns that we are having right now, first of all, is climate change. Climate change combined with water shortage, consumable water shortage. So I think if we combine these two and we add the growth of the population that are stipulated to be at 9 or 10 billion in a couple of years, this brings quite a few concerns, and I think this is one of the main drivers of the big changes that are upcoming in the next couple of years. So if we look on the cities itself, for example, we know that about 70% of the population is planned to start living in the mega cities. So there are not going to be more any kind of small villages. They are all merging to the big cities, which brings a lot of challenges. I mean, from the mobility side on one side, but as well from the food and how to bring the food to such a big masses in such small spaces. So I think the industries definitely need to be clever and to come with ways where they can address the very huge volumes of food into the cities. But at the same time, as soon as you have so many people living in one small area, their cravings for different kind of foods will start growing a lot. And this, you can see it already. So the demand on variety of food is already there. So the big companies need to start focusing on how to produce on big scales, but as well on how to bring diversity into their portfolios. And this is where I personally see a huge combination of bringing novel products, new kind of products for the regions that are not used, for example, South American products into here. I think this is where kind of nice trends or important trends could be a role in the next couple of years. But if we look now a bit on the environment side, we know that about 25% of the global greenhouse gases emissions are produced by the agricultural production. This is a clear statement. We know it. So we need to target that on one point. And on the other point, we know that roughly 70% of the water consumption as of today goes as well for the agricultural side. So these 2 points are huge points where we can start addressing on different ways. And as John Eng was mentioning before, Singapore has started to develop and look into all these kind of industries and how to compensate and how to make it better. And one of the big points and topics, as you mentioned, just Pablo, is the whole meat alternative industry. So what is the meat alternative is basically to look either into plant-based meat alternatives or lab cells grown meat alternatives. If we look onto these two topics, we see the cell lab grown meat as a huge potential, but as for now, it's very difficult to scale it up. So we believe that in maybe 10 years, that's going to be the huge mega trend. But right now, we start with something that is tangible and easy to access as for now. And this is where the extrusion system with plant-based meat is starting to play a huge role, not only in Southeast Asia, but globally. We are seeing and we are forecasting that in about 3 years, about 10% of the meat market is going to be replaced by plant-based meat alternatives. However, if we look a bit more in future, we believe that in about maybe 10 to 15 years, about 60 to 70% of the complete meat alternative might be able to be replaced by lab cell grown meat or plant-based meat. So this is a clear trend and the mega trend that we are seeing for the upcoming years. If we look on other points or other topics that are leading mega trends worldwide is, for example, to food waste. So currently, from about 1/3 of the produced food, it's wasted. And most of it is not being recovered yet. So that's going to be definitely a huge trend upcoming in the next years, but it has already started. There are a lot of startups, there are a lot of companies on looking how to use side streams into recover it and create value out of it. So if I stay quick on the meat alternative, we are seeing already, for example, plant-based meat alternatives that are being introduced with, for example, brewer spent grains or apple pulps, or this kind of side streams that were considered industrial food waste, but we are introducing it again into a consumable product. So this is for sure just one topic. I was discussing 2 weeks ago with the startup in Japan, where they are looking into, for example, ferment the food waste, create the fermented product, turn it into powder, and use it as well for plant-based products. So we definitely think this is going to be the next change, the next happening in the world. However, there are going to be a lot of governmental regulatories to see and to regulate what kind of food waste can be used for the human consumption. So I think there is going to be a huge break and a huge stop and until all this basically boundaries are finally open and aligned and given policies to it, what kind of food waste can be reused for the human consumption, but what to do with all the other food waste that is not able to be reused for the human consumption. And this is one very interesting point where the whole animal nutrition side comes in place a huge role. So most likely you have heard about insects, about the whole new insect trend of how we could use the food waste to feed insects, and these insects make it as larvae, and out of these larvae create protein powders or lipids that can be used again to feed animals. The most easy way, for example, is for fish farming. So the fish farming, you have low spaces, you can create your fish farms, even vertical farms. You can have your food waste decomposal, have your insect farms, because they are literally farms for insects, and feed again the protein of the insects back to the fishes, which can be all done in a very small footprint. So definitely by creating this kind of circular economies, closing the loops in the economies, in the current economies, it's one of the big trends that we are seeing as a global trend, but as well here in Southeast Asia. Of course, it's not the only one, and I'm sure Octavio and Taskun will speak a bit about other kind of trends and other kind of industries that are looking. But if I can summarize it quick on this, there's the 3 points that I'm seeing it here is the raising of the size of the cities, more population living in cities, the challenge that all brings with that on the variety and amount of food, on looking on food alternatives to compensate the global impact on the greenhouse emissions, on the water consumption or water waste, and ultimately to close the economies, to find circular economies, how to stop the food waste and how to recover the food waste and turn it into high value products again.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Christian, for the summary as well. Many keywords summarized in the 3 aspects and very impressive. If I continue, I would like to pass the word to the 2 gentlemen. What would you say, Tan-Suk? Is there something you would like to add to what Christian said, particularly, for example, the circular economy? Do you see more trends where we need to develop new alternatives? We need to develop, based on new technologies, other ways to face and to face the challenges. If you start with a very brief introduction of yourself and your company, please, Tan-Suk.
Right, thank you, Dr. Pablo. Let me build on what Christian said, but before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Tan-Suk Jain. I come from India, 25 plus years in the food industry. I started with B2C in the food industry and then moved to B2B industry, worked in various functional ingredients, flavors, and taste area, including the dairy side, cultures, enzymes. Yeah. So that has been my experience, and I've been with Givaudan for 9 years now. I was heading the South Asia business, that's in India and the neighboring countries in South Asia. And last 3 years, I've been heading ASEAN, based out of Singapore. So that's me. And a quick introduction to Givaudan. So we are a 250-year young company, having 2 divisions, taste and well-being, fragrance and beauty. So, in terms of our creation, so just to give an example from a favorite drink, what we consume, right, from, early morning tea to the midday sort of drink or a meal and an evening dessert, to plus using our perfumes and also application in cosmetic and laundry industry. So that's broadly Givaudan. But talking about taste and well-being, we've been a global leader in taste and well-being, especially, as I said, 250-year young company, especially focused more on flavors and taste in the past, but now with our expanded portfolio, we do offer a range of nutritional and functional ingredients. And coupled with that, I think what's most important is to have a fantastic understanding of consumers. I think that's a very important part. Plus passion to sort of collaborate and co-create with our clients to really create consumer preferred products and which will sort of be act as a disruption in the food and beverage industry. So that's briefly about Givaudan. But to quickly add on to what Christian said about circular economy, I think that's a very important point. And then what basically when we say about circular economy, what we really mean is to really design in a very designed way, remove the waste and the pollution and areas which are sort of not sustainable in nature. I think that's a very important aspect of that. And how we do it in terms of participating in this whole process is to sort of work with the local communities. I think one of the important factor, in fact, there was a research done, and when people were asked in the industry, what are the biggest challenge today one faces in the agri and food sector? So to add on what Christian said about climate change and environmental degradation, another important factor is the farmer education and farming practices. I think today, if you really see across the globe and particularly in emerging markets, when you go, it's a very fragmented. I wouldn't say industry, but the practices what they have, and marginal farmers holding very small piece of land and using very age-old practices. So I think one of the area where we really work and as part of this whole circular economy is to really educate the farmers. And then we have a program, we call it as origination program. And then we talk about that, say closer to Singapore, in Indonesia, in Sulawesi, we work with farmers who grow patchouli, and then we actually buy this patchouli from them to be further processed in our fragrance and beauty division. Also, what we do is we work with farmers in Madagascar who grow vanilla and really share the best practices. And this is important purely from a sustainability point of view, because to drive home the point like consumption of water, what are the best practices? Can they grow multiple crops in the same piece of land? Again, relating to the earlier point when we were talking about vertical farming versus using a huge piece of land. So from that perspective, we strongly believe that is one area we need to really focus on and contribute to the entire ecosystem. And what is also more sustainable is changing the behavior of people and practices. I think that is one area which is the most toughest thing in the entire value chain, because if you have to really spend energy, it's on one side you have technology, but I think you need the raw material, and you need the raw material in a very sustainable way. And there it's important that the people, the farmers who are growing this, they understand why they are doing what they're doing. And this is where Givaudan come into play, and we participate in that. So that's my point on circular economy. Over to you, Dr. Pablo.
Thank you, Tangsoo. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, and having all this information, I mean, having understood and having learned about what are the mega trends, what are companies looking at, when, for example, for me, very interesting what you just mentioned, Tangsoo, farming education. So all aspects or instruments to be more efficient, to get the maximum out of what we have today. Having heard that, and having heard as well John's presentation just a few minutes before, so the role of Singapore and everything what it means, innovation, manufacturing, and so on. Otavio, if we now jump to Latin America, and we look at the many, the many companies and the potential we have in the food industry. We have companies exporting, big companies, we have smaller, mid-sized companies, smaller companies, and so on. What would you say is the role Latin American companies might have in this race for food innovation? Do you think they can play, the Latin American companies, a major role in all this development, and why? And again, a brief introduction, your person and particularly your company, Otavio first, before answering.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Pablo. Thanks, Angela, for inviting me for that. And bom dia a todos de Sudamérica. I'm Otavio. I'm from Brazil, living here in Singapore for 3 years. I'm far from Brazil for the last 10 years, working in Europe, and as I said, for the latest 3 years here in Singapore, fully dedicated for the last 60 years just for the food sector. I work for Accenture. Most of you maybe heard about Accenture as a technology company, but Accenture today is an end-to-end player. We are, just to give a flavor, one of the biggest, or the biggest digital agents in the world. Today, we are partners of 9 in 10 of companies around the world. Givaudan, for example, is a client of Accenture in Europe, and we work super closer with food companies, and I'm fully dedicated to these segments. So a pleasure to be here, learning and sharing with you all. So going to your question, Dr. Pablo, I would like to bring 2 different perspectives on the way I believe South America companies can play a major role. First of all, I know the way farmers run cropping from like many different, let me say, angles in different regions. So as I said, I live in Brazil, I moved to US, I moved to Europe, and I moved to Asia. So I've seen pineapples in Brazil, I've seen pineapples in Philippines, I see mangoes in the north of Brazil, I see mangoes here in Thailand, I see crop of corn in Brazil, I saw corn in US. And what I can tell you, and on a very transparent way, is that the way South America run plantation activities is very, very sustainable. And I think we are not putting a good marketing on the way we've been running the plantations. I can tell you, the way, if we compare the way we crop bananas, the way we grow bananas, in Costa Rica, compared to the way they grow bananas in Philippines, you're gonna see the amount of plastic, the amount of trash in the plantations. The situation is completely different. The bananas are by far much more sustainable from the way they are being produced. And the South American companies, they are not taking the advantage of this. And most of the time, what we see is that we suffer, let me say, from the bombs of the media, from like all the things that comes from the unfair trade in the road, that most of the time just create like big truths that are not indeed the big truths. And this applies not just for the crops I mentioned, this applies for many other things. Why Singapore, for example, has the biggest consumption of pork from Brazil? How many areas in Brazil we have that are free from aftosa and that are not using chemicals or vaccines to deal with the disease because they are simply free of? And I talked to a big cooperative in Brazil 2 weeks ago, and I said, how many times you brought this information to the trade agreements you have? Oh, no, we just use it. No, this needs to be like fully vocal, because I think my fellows here, Tansuk and Christian, they share the consumer in this part of the world. He start putting a lot of constraints on the table, constraints about is your food safety, is your food sustainable, is your food coming in a fair trade? And of course, price is important, but these three dimensions are very important, especially when it comes for the food innovation. And I think this is something that South American companies, they are not doing on the proper way. They are not taking the advantage of a very mature cropping practice, agricultural practice, and bringing this to the table. The image that we have most of the time, and I'm Brazilian, so I feel very comfortable to share this because I'm part of the problem. But the image that Brazilian or Argentinian or Chile or Peruvian or Colombian or any other Central America, we bring it to not just to Asia, but to outside of South America is not the best one. And it's not the best one. We all know why. There is a war. There is a trade war where people use a little bit of this to undervalue let me say, the capacity we have installed for agricultural activities. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that I truly believe that there is a role in, let me say, in the cutting edge agricultural practice, but there is something that we need to share that is not a cutting edge. That is the practice that we are using for the bread and butter activities we are doing. And we need to be conscious that, for example, the example of the bananas, the way FIFI is running bananas in Central America is much better than the way we've been doing this in this part of the world. How can we trade the technologies we are using for that? So it's not just about sell the goods, but sell the intelligence that is being used today in the agriculture space. We have in Brazil, for example, we have Embrapa, that is the most famous agronomic research center in the world. It's responsible for the biggest achievement of yield improvement in a massive crop like soybeans in the world. And we are not doing that. And if you talk to colleagues here, they all still have the idea, oh, Brazil is cropping soybeans in the Amazon forest. And if you go down into the details, you're going to see that this is not what's happening. So first of all, we need to improve the way we are bringing the image of South America to this part of the world. The second thing is that, and this is applicable not just for South America companies, it's applicable for US companies, North American organizations as well. The way we do business in our countries, it's not the way we're going to do business here. The route to market, and I will stick just for the route to market, because I think Christian made the point about the cultural aspects. When yes is not indeed a yes. The consumer, as Tansuk said, is completely different as well. But the route to market is different. The arrangements you move from your DC to a retail or to a channel that is a channel that we don't have maybe in our countries, we needed to adapt. So most of the time, the companies, they need to be conscious about, I have a product, but I don't have access to the market, and I don't have even the capability to route to market, to go to this market. So instead of try to be a superhero and come to this market and try to establish yourself on a solo flying, try to find partners. The easiest way to come into the ecosystem is through partnerships here, and try to understand what do you want to achieve. The discussion, for example, on alternative protein that Christian was referring to, I think that there is a big dilemma today for the organizations. Where do I want to play? Do I want to be the R&D organization developing products? Do I want to be the company who has a brand go into the consumers because I understand the consumer and I have the access to the market. So you need to define where you want to play. But bear in mind, the more you go downstream, the more you go closer to the consumer, the more you need to make your ability to go to the market indigenous or put an Asian flavor on this. Don't try to route to the market on a Brazilian way or on a North American way or a Colombian way. In Asia, it won't succeed at all. And we've seen these in examples from many different sectors, not just on food, on personal care, in many others. Many companies that are succeeding around the world, in many other areas, when they come here with the same model, they fail. Even big companies, we can say that. So these are, I think, two pieces of let me say, comments that I want to share. So summarizing, how do you want to play? And if you want to play a brand business, try to understand who do you need to partner with. And the first one that I mentioned, try to make your capabilities, the value of your capabilities, explicit on this market. These are very important things that I would like to highlight, Dr. Pablo.
Thank you, Otavio. I'm glad to hear that, because we heard in Tim's presentation at the end, after seeing the presentation, how diverse the entire space was he was referring to, and he talked about 2 sectors only. But the key to me was one of the last statements Tim Hill made. You need to have a country-by-country strategy, and you need to know what you want to do. And to me, that was a quite significant statement. And may I keep asking you, Otavio, because I think it matches quite well. Having heard that, and you mentioned that already, what would be then the key recommendation you have to a Latin American company coming over to Southeast Asia? What would be, if you summarize in 1, 2, 3, 4 points, what would be the key recommendation you give to them? Okay. I'm assuming, of course, that the markets in Asia are attractive for Latin American companies in the food space, and they are willing to participate in the opportunities we are having in Asia. With that background, what is the key recommendation you would give them?
Okay, good. So I think first of all, Asia is not China, no. So let's start with this. Asia is not only China. Southeast Asia is a fantastic market, and I think the statement about Southeast Asia is not a single market, is real. So if we look for the region, and we see Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and we look for Vietnam, and we see the nuances and the different perspectives of these countries. My main recommendation, and things that we are discussing with many clients, first of all, is for each of, and the example is applicable for any sector, for food, for beverage, for personal care, for any sector. The route to market is completely different in all these countries. If you look for the traditional trade in Singapore, the traditional trade maybe in Malaysia and Indonesia, we are talking about things that can be similar. But beyond that, and the channels that are the attractive ones, they are completely different. So you need to understand the different route to market for the different countries. First, the second one, companies that are succeeding are companies who are really making a big effort to understand the consumer. It's very important. I call these indigenous. It's very important to put the flavor on your product. It's very important, because if you bring your product, your Western product for this part of the world, maybe you can succeed. But your brand will get acquainted by the consumers in the moment you get closer to their hearts. And this is where some companies are making a huge step. I can give you an example for a Dutch coffee brand, one of the leaders in hot beverage around the world. This company decided to make their go-to-market for Southeast Asia. And the first thing they did was an acquisition of a local Malaysia brand. And I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with the CEO of this organization, and I raised a very a frank question for this person. And I asked, hey, who is the tail and who is the dog today for you? It's the new local brand that you acquired here for coffee, or is your like a core brand from Europe that you try to bring into Southeast Asia? And he said to me, the tail is my core brand from Europe, and the dog is my acquisition, my local acquisition. This is giving me the access to the market. So it's very important for companies that are coming. If you are not able to because not necessarily you needed to buy, but you can partner. So you need to understand one more time who are the key partners for each part of the role here that you needed to join to get closer to the consumer. So Dr. Pablo, these are I think the two critical ones that I would like to share.
Thank you, Otavio. Thank you. Now let's go and keep, because you mentioned what are the critical partners in the different sectors or functions, you need to have. It's distribution, it's manufacturing, or is innovation. And therefore, let's jump to the topic a little bit the topic, what might be the role of Singapore in supporting or being a platform for Latin American companies, and what might be functions which can be exercised in Singapore. So kind of a base to prepare or to develop or whatever to enter the markets in Asia, Southeast Asia, Asian, as you mentioned. Asia is not China. So Christian, what would you think about Singapore's role in all these new developing segments? What might be the role Singapore might have? We heard already a little bit about Singapore. John shared with us the view and what are the opportunities. What would you say, Christian?
Well, thanks, Pablo. Look, it's a tricky question, and I think there are a lot of political issues involved in that question as well. But as I was mentioning just before, I think Singapore, the ecosystem in Singapore, is just perfect for Southeast Asia on regards different aspects. First of all, it's the variety of the cultures that you have here. So you want to try with a different culture, something, you will find it here. You will find already how good acceptable is a product within the different behaviors, consumption behaviors that you can find in Southeast Asia. So this is one point. But then the second point is Singapore is kind of a central hub for Southeast Asia on regards to everything. So a lot of countries in Southeast Asia are looking into what is Singapore doing. Singapore is moving towards that direction. A lot of countries will follow it. So it's kind of the leader in a way of innovation for Southeast Asia. If we add this part, and basically I agreed on John's presentation, Singapore government and the Singapore agencies are really, really looking into the whole food development. I mean, as you can hear and see from the presentations, we are not self-sustainable here in Singapore. So we depend a lot on the imports for the whole consumption, for the human consumption here. And their target by 30 means we need to develop a lot. We need to create new ways of making food. So what is happening here in Singapore is they are, in other ways, creating future ways how to produce food in compact areas. And if we look on the trend globally, we are having less and less space worldwide. We are getting a bigger population, so the available land space is just getting tighter. We want to maintain our forests, we want to maintain the green areas, so we don't want to expand our footprint. So we need to come and create new ways of how to manufacture the food. In addition to this, Singapore is, as I shared, is giving a lot of grants and is helping companies to develop it. And one great example that John was mentioning is, for example, the Protein Innovation Center. There's certainly a kind of a co-investment and support from the Singapore government, but together with Givaudan and Bühler. And why Singapore? Why we don't stay in Europe and we develop something in Europe for the market? And this is where Ottavio was nailing it and say, you need to develop something here for the region. If you come with a product from Europe, from America, from somewhere else, and you want to push it into Asia, most likely you will not succeed. Because the paladar, the likeness for food, for taste, their spices that they use here, the way they cook, it's a complete different way. Call it more sophisticated, call it more antique, call it whichever way you want it. It's just really different. And they are used to this kind of taste. So you need to adapt to this kind of consumer behaviors, consumer likeness that are being here in Asia. So definitely this is a point that you need to take care a lot to develop and to adapt the products to the region. And that's why Singapore is a very easy place to start with all different ecosystems that you can find here, supports, governmental support, a lot of different companies, a lot of headquarters of companies that are based in Southeast Asia are certainly here in Singapore. The main office, research labs, application centers. I was even talking to Ferrero Rocher. Ferrero has as well a very big application center here in Singapore. So there are really a lot of big players. Whatever you want to develop, you have a lot of facilities here to develop a product with the Asian taste for the Asian market.
Thank you, Christian. If I just continue in the same line of thought, Tansuk, does it mean, I mean, we understand the role of Singapore. Does it mean Latin American companies in the more downstreams, does it mean these companies need to have product development on site in Asia?
I think absolutely, Pablo. I think that's a good question, and maybe just a couple of points just to add to what Christian said and Ottavio said on why Singapore. I think one another important point is the availability of talent. I think that's a very, very important resource in the entire cycle when we talk of food innovation from development to go to market. So I think availability of great talent, skilled workforce, and of course a fantastic infrastructure that's been created by the government here. And on top of it, the whole entrepreneurial spirit in terms of trying new things, I think definitely it makes a lot of sense. But coming to the question, Pablo, what you mentioned, how Latin American companies, whether they should come here for product development. And my one word answer would be yes. And let me explain why. Ottavio touched on that. Everything starts with the consumer. You have to keep the consumer at the center of everything what we do. I think that when we talk of consumer centricity, I think that's what it really means is to understand what the consumer wants, what the consumer likes or dislikes, and start from there. And then the minute when we say that, what's very important is to have that insight, have that local insight, and leverage that to develop your product or service, whatever we want to offer to the market. And also going back to the point of having a very, very country specific strategy, it basically means understanding the local consumer in that particular country or geography which we are targeting. And just to support that fact, when we say how the consumer is evolving, right? So when we talk of Asia or APAC, the millennials and Gen Z, will be 46% of the population. Yeah. And this millennials and Gen Z, they continue to have a very, very strong influence on the on what they want and what they don't want in terms of their preferences and choices. So when we talk of Asian consumer behavior, yes, it is getting complex. It's evolving very rapidly. So what is really required is to have foot on the ground in terms of having that local insight, leverage that insight to develop a product which will be preferred by these consumers. Now the point comes in whether you want to do everything on your own or you want to leverage the partners in the ecosystem. And I think that is a very important point to address. And my experience is if you leverage the partners in the ecosystem, that speeds up the entire product development process and go to market, the entire value chain. So it's not just about the product development, but also, you know, the supply chain. When we talk of go to market, in that entire value chain, you need to have partnership so that you leverage on their expertise and at the same time you focus on your core area. So if a food manufacturer comes, say a Latin American company wants to come into Southeast Asia, very important is A, to understand the consumer, B, leverage the partnership here. So when I say partnership, it could be the product developers, the ingredient suppliers, the machine manufacturers, the packaging suppliers. You need to really have that ecosystem and leverage the ecosystem. And I think Singapore really provides that ecosystem where we just saw in earlier talks, a fantastic number of players operating in that area and providing that service. So that's point number 2. The point number 3 is if you're in Singapore, I think one is the ecosystem, but second is from a go-to-market point of view, you still have to work with the players who can provide the last mile connectivity. I think that's something very, very important. So when we talk of downstream, so that is such an important piece because when we talk of Southeast Asia, the geography is so wide. You know, Indonesia alone has 16,000 islands. So just imagine reaching a consumer in the in the far-fetched island and delivering a product or a service. You need somebody who is going to support you in that entire process. So how do you get that is to have that very solid network, have that last mile connectivity, which will enable you to sort of serve this particular market. The last piece also, when we are sort of trying to do or use this ecosystem and develop product, understand consumer, I think very important point, which you heard earlier, is the value for money. I think the consumer here is very discerning. They just want value and how we are going to do it in a very, very cost effective manner. So delivering the right quality at the right cost and a very good safe product which can be traceable, you know. So when we really try to connect this whole concept of QCDS, quality, cost, delivery, and safety comes into play. And this is where I think leveraging ecosystem and partnership is very important. The other point is, again, there is a flexibility in choosing partners, using the right partners for your entire thing. And what Singapore offers is that choice and that flexibility in terms of picking up the right partners to develop your products and take it to the market.
Thank you, Tan Suk. All right, gentlemen, we are running out of time. We are but perfect in time. And I propose 30 seconds for each. What would be your key conclusion to the matter and your key recommendation? Otavio, 30 seconds.
I am on mute. I'm having technology issues here. Sorry. My key recommendation is try to understand consumer, try to understand the go-to-market, bring your products, and if they are good, by understanding consumer and by understanding how to route this to market, you're going to succeed on a very good way. These are the key. Don't try to make the same things you do in your country here, because it's not a recipe for success.
Thank you, Otavio. Christian, 30 seconds.
Oh, I think two things are here important things. One is the shipment, what Tanskun was saying. This Southeast Asia is a tropical area. So there are huge concerns on how to transport, how to maintain, mainly on cooling chains, if you're looking more onto the frozen or cool products. And the other side is just to understand the current market here. Understand it's not South America. We have 1/3 or 1/4 of the area, but we have 1.5 times of the size of the population. So there are complete different dimensions. And I think this is really important to understand how this ecosystem in Southeast Asia works.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Tansuk, 30 seconds.
Perfect. Again, as I said, consumers, keep consumer at the center of what you're doing. A quick example, when we are talking of alternate protein, plant-based protein, burgers and patties have become so popular coming from West, but what will work in this market is very local format, like dumplings or meatballs, right? I think that's one example. Second is you have to create for the country, in the country, or for the region, in the region. That's a very important, and that aspect is not just product development, but also supply chain and manufacturing. So that is point number 2. Third is very important, sustainability. I think for consumers, sustainability is also important because they have become very conscious, and especially what they consume, what goes in their body. So sustainability in the entire value chain is becoming more and more important. And the last point is about partnership, as I said, leverage the ecosystem and to sort of offer the right product to the consumers, and at the same time driving the efficiency in the entire chain.
Thank you, Tansuk. All right. So for now, we close the panel discussion for the panel discussion, and now it's open floor Q&A from the audience. Do we have questions from the audience? Let me have a look at the chat. We have one question in the chat. May I read the question to everybody? So, do you consider food traceability, sellable unit level, and its benefits, enhancing supply chain visibility, confidence with food provenance, and customer engagement experience? So, the benefits, a trend on the food industry. Is this type of technology being considered typically for high value-added products, a general trend or not? Much happening in large scale in this space yet. So it's a little bit about traceability. It's a little bit about benefits, enhancing supply chain benefit. Is the technology considered for high value-added products? Who would like to answer the question?
Maybe I can take this, Pablo, quickly to add on the food traceability. I think it's getting its due. It's getting more and more important. We see manufacturers really focusing on that and trying to educate the consumers on that angle. Whether it has really caught on and it has gone to all the entire food industry, I don't think so, but it's evolving rapidly. I think that's an important step from traceability. But from a provenance point of view, I think it is used more on the marketing side, where you try to position a product saying, okay, this particular flavor or coffee is coming from this area, and so on and so forth. So that is more as a marketing tool today. But having said that, all this are sort of increasingly being adapted very well by consumers, and consumers more and more are looking forward to this kind of trends. So my take would be, I think this is important. It's small, but it will become significant going forward.
Thank you, Tansuk. Otavio, please.
Yeah, I would just, I think it was perfect, Tansuk. I would just add something. I believe in a very short term, it won't be like something for it's going to be short term. I think traceability from two different perspectives. I will keep it separate on my point here, the marketing one. But from a supply chain perspective, I think from a biosecurity point of view, this will become a big burden for the industry. So, and I believe that Singapore especially has a big concern about the food that is coming to the country. And in case, for an example, Singapore becomes a gate to be a trade ring for food, there should be discussions about what would be the patterns of, let me say, biosecurity that will be in place. And for sure, traceability will be mandatory to comply with this. So I think it won't be negotiable in the future. And I think, as Tansuk said, there will be transmission to the brand, especially when it comes, as the question was stated, I think when it comes for high value added products or high value products, this will become really part of the brand or part of the price you are paying. You wanna buy a mango from a family that you know there is no child labor, that is respecting the environment, so you can track and trace by scanning the QR code and looking for that. So you wanna see that the coffee that you are buying is really from like the region that is the region that let me say the roaster is saying is the region. So it's I think there should be two big dimensions on this.
Thank you, Otavio. Thank you, Otavio. Some more questions from the audience. I'm not seeing in the chat another more questions, but to Latin America, our Latin American participants, is there a question from Latin America? Please raise your hands. We see that.
Who's gonna win the Copa America?
Who's gonna? This is a nice comment. I just wanted to comment, Otavio. Brazil is not only an excellent football nation, it's an excellent food producer as well.
I think we are better food producer than football nation by the end.
All right, I see there are no more questions. If I conclude with the final remarks, the first remark is I would like to thank the participants for these extremely interesting insights about the market in Asia, the development of the market, the needed infrastructure, actually the recommendations as well, not to do errors which are avoidable. So a big thank you to Christian, Tansuk, and Otavio for being around and to sharing your experiences. Number two is two more remarks from my end. The first remark I would like to make is the market in Asia is huge. And we saw from the presentation from Tim as well, it's growing. And we saw only two segments. We saw the presentation from John in the new technology, alternatives in food, in meat, growing markets in every aspect. So to motivate the Latin American companies indeed to have a look, but being careful, as has been mentioned during the panel discussion, we don't need to be, and I like this word in inverted commas, the word hero. We don't need to be a hero, and we can look for advice and we can look for partners. And maybe we need to change a little bit from Latin America, our mindset in understanding professional advice, not as a cost, it is an investment. Because behind this investment is the access, the professional access to extreme big markets. And that's the price you pay. That's the price you pay, and there is a return of investment over time. The second quite important aspect I would like to mention is what all the panelists mentioned actually. We need to have in Asia products from Asia. So the development has to have a big touch of Asia. It's not enough to bring, the products we have in Europe or the North America or in Latin America, just like that, to bring it to Asia, and that's going to be already a success. Wrong. This is wrong. And the third comment I would like to Singapore. Singapore is an opportunity for Latin American companies. Singapore is a platform providing the entry to the market and providing many, many more aspects related to the infrastructure. And having a closer look in Singapore, I motivate every Latin American company to do so, to have a closer look in Singapore, because Singapore is itself an asset. It's offering the platform many, many companies willing to enter a new market, offering the infrastructure needed to do this in a very systematic way and in a very successful way. And with these comments, I would like to conclude, and again, to thank the audience, but particularly to thank the panelists for sharing with us their experiences and their knowledge. Thank you very much to everybody. It's yours, Angela.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you very much to the panelists and all the participants and speakers, and for everybody to stay until the end. Tomorrow we have our next session. We will be sharing on company cases. So we will see you tomorrow, and have a good evening for those in Asia. Have a good rest of the day for those in Latin America. And we are here to support, find opportunities and support companies to enter to this market. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.